Assessment for learning. In this video, I'm going to review the development of this topic and attempt to clarify the meanings of the terms assessment for learning. Almost half a century ago, David Osby in 1968 suggested that the most important factor influencing learning is what the learner already knows, that the teacher should ascertain this and teach accurately. At that time, and perhaps even now, such a prescription might seem simple, but students do not learn what they already been taught. For many years, the word assessment was used primarily to describe processes of evaluating the effectiveness of sequences and instructional activities when the sequence was completed. The actions that guided learning processes before the end of the sequence were generally now regarded as kind of assessments. Cambridge considered assessment for learning to be an approach integrated into teaching and learning, which created feedback for students to improve learning. In 2011, Bennett said in his book called Formative Assessment, A Critical Review, that assessment for learning is concerned with practices. Similarly, William, Harrison, and Black in 1994 made emphasis on feedback in their book Teachers Developing Assessment for Learning, Impact on Students' Achievement, arguing that feedback ranges from the informal to more formal. Moreover, in 1998, Black, in his book Assessment and Classroom Learning, stated that assessment for learning is any assessment for which the first priority is in design and practice is to serve the purpose of promoting pupils' learning. Besides, Gibbs in 2002, in his book called Beyond Testing, suggested that assessment for learning begins as students become aware of the goals of instruction and the criteria for performance, and it involves goal setting, monitoring process, and reflecting on results. What other terms are associated with assessment for learning? We have formative assessment, that is a similar meaning. Summative assessment sums up the learning of students at the end of periods of learning. School-based assessment is often confused with it, and diagnostic assessment, that is usually refers to assessment that identifies what the learner already knows. What is the theory behind assessment for learning? It's closely associated with social constructivist theories of learning, mental models, and assumptions that the learner uses to understand a subject and are complex and constructed from previous experiences and interactions with people. What are the benefits of assessment for learning? It helps learners focus on the aim of elements of their learning. It creates a valuable connection between assessment and learning activity, and it can support the students to become confident, reflective, innovative, and engaged. What are the challenges of assessment for learning? The word assessment leads to confusion because it is commonly associated with testing, whereas there are also other ways of judging learning besides testing. There is a risk that the amount of summative assessing can increase. How can teachers make the best use of assessment for learning? Much of it is a skill practice that is core to being a good teacher. It involves multiple activities, for example, sharing feedback, formative use of summative tests. So results can be used by teachers to change their teaching. But what does it make for teachers and students? For teachers, it plan and modify teaching and learning. It pinpoint students' strengths. It also help identify students' learning needs in a clear and constructive way. And finally, it involves parents, family, and learner in their process of learning. Assessment for learning.
Created using Powtoon.